everybody, and welcome back to an invisible and invisible illness awareness project. As promised last week, I'm going to get into talking about elimination diets this week. So first of all, my EOE was diagnosed when I was 23, but it wasn't until I was 24 that I started going around to specialists trying to figure out why I was so tired all the time. And I was almost 25 by the time it dawned on me that it could have something to do with my GI tract, but I wasn't actually given any information about EOE when I was diagnosed. So right around the time I turned 25, I was diagnosed with histamine intolerance and fructose malabsorption, and I got these info booklets about what life with each of those is like, what you can and can't eat, avoiding high histamine foods, high fructose foods, what low histamine foods and low fructose foods are safe. So then it occurred to me that maybe there's a list like that for EOE too, and I finally looked into it. So then I had my list of top EOE triggers, which actually work a bit different from histamine and fructose, because there aren't foods that are high in eosinophils, but there are foods that are more likely to trigger eosinophils. And those are foods that contribute to inflammation in your body on a very small level as it is for anybody. But if you're completely healthy, you might not even notice. The top two are wheat and dairy, and interestingly enough, somebody had told me years before that I should quit both of those two because most people actually are intolerant and just don't realize, because the side effects, the symptoms from eating those foods are just a part of their normal everyday life, because those foods are so ingrained into the normal diet of the society they live in. So thanks to the advice of that person, I had already switched from cow's milk to goat's milk a few years earlier. And then a year after that, I wanted to try going grain-free completely, and that eliminated milk entirely from my diet. And then I had discovered that I didn't tolerate milk anymore. During that time that I was living grain-free, I did feel really great, but then I thought, well, why limit myself if I don't have to? So I went back to eating grain. And then, interestingly enough, after my first impaction, my esophagus was so damaged that anytime I tried to drink milk, beer, or wine, I would have really horrible pains like heartburn, maybe hours later in the night when I was sleeping. And so I did cut those out in liquid form already, but at that point I realized there was maybe some sense to cutting them out in solid form as well, like cheese, bread, pasta. The other top triggers for EOE or IGIDs in general are seafood, eggs, and legumes, which includes peanuts, tree nuts, bees, beans, lentil, and soy, along with any other legumes. Fortunately, I wasn't eating any legumes to begin with because I'm actually allergic. But what I found strange was that instead of getting any information along with my diagnosis, all I was told was to take the PPIs, which I didn't tolerate and quickly stopped taking, and not to eat anything I'm allergic to, which obviously, who would do that? But I wasn't warned about these top triggers. So at that point, when I received the information about histamine intolerance and fructose malabsorption, I looked into EOE and found that list. I combined my three lists, cut out all of the top triggers for all three diagnoses, and I was feeling a bit better temporarily, but I still wasn't really feeling better. So I decided I wanted to start over at zero. I just kept thinking there's got to be this one trigger that I need to eliminate, and then I can go back to living a regular life. So I wanted to start over with zero, and I knew I couldn't handle fasting. I knew I couldn't deal with just one food, so I decided to start with two. I got fresh carrots every day and frozen meat, which is important for histamine, and I would have a kilo of each every single day. Obviously, the price of the meat was ridiculous, so I was trying to introduce other foods as quickly as possible, but any day that I added even just a little bit of oregano or tried a quarter of a frozen fig, it would knock me out and I'd find myself back in bed. So I wasn't really sure what to do, but during that month I felt amazing. I was so active, going non-stop, doing everything I wanted to do and more. But I was also concerned because before I started that, I had already lost a lot of weight and I wanted to do everything I could to regain weight. So what I did was I decided after a month to add a few foods back in, and it did put me back in bed for most of the day. But I realized at that point that all of the other symptoms that I had been dealing with seemed to have vanished. So overall I felt a lot better, and that was 3 years ago now. And to this day, if I go off diet and eat something that I know I shouldn't, I do see those symptoms flaring up again. So it definitely made a difference. It has improved my quality of life. But the important and difficult thing about elimination diets is that this isn't something that you can just test in a lab. You get a lot of false positives and false negatives when doing food testing, whether it's the skin prick test or a blood test. The only real reliable way to know for sure what you can tolerate is to try eliminating it yourself. But the important thing is not to just eliminate foods, because you don't want to eliminate things that you do tolerate, but it's usually really hard to judge your reaction when you first eliminate it, because with a lot of foods you're so used to eating them that you're going to be craving them as soon as you cut them out, and that part can be really challenging. I remember even when I cut grains out a few years before I had to, walking through town and everywhere I looked there were bread products, and it was driving me crazy. So I planned to cheat once a week, and I would allow myself to eat whatever I was craving on that one day. So it is important to challenge those foods that you've eliminated, which means you eliminate them for a while and then you try them again to see how you feel, because when you reintroduce them is when you're more likely to feel those symptoms flare up, and then you'll realize that you felt a lot better without them. But it's also important with some foods to allow enough time to go by where you're not eating them, because like in my experience with gluten, if I was eating gluten once a week, my body still didn't have enough time without it to really grasp the fact that it was a problem. It wasn't until I had gone completely without gluten for about 6 months that I had a really strong reaction to it. And at that point it was clear that I definitely needed to stay away from it. I can still cheat from time to time and maybe eat a gluten croissant one day, but then if I try to eat it again the next day, I can tell that my esophagus is inflamed and I'll start choking on other foods that are normally safe. The same thing happens with dairy. Fish, I've discovered, isn't actually a problem for me personally, which is why it's really important to challenge it, because for me there's no need to avoid it, but I wouldn't have known that for sure if I hadn't gone a while without eating it. I do have different responses depending on the food, but overall the general idea is that I'm much better off without a lot of these foods. If you have any questions and you want me to go further in depth on this, let me know. I'd be happy to make another video. If you have experience with elimination diets yourself, let us know how that went for you. And if you're planning on trying an elimination diet, let us know what's going through your mind. Don't forget, we've got Uninvisible t-shirts on Teespring now with some great inspirational quotes. If you'd like to support this channel, you can pledge as little as $1 per month by becoming a patron on Patreon. If you'd like to support me directly, you can donate to my GoFundMe. And if you'd like to help contribute to subtitles and translations into other languages, you can do that as well. All of the links are in the description below. Thanks for watching. If you like the video, give it a thumbs up. If you like the channel and you haven't subscribed yet, don't forget to do that too. And I will see you guys next week.